Gather your materials. You need a mask mold, cardboard for hair, a cup of warm water if using plaster strips, and plaster strips with scissors. With masking tape, please put your name and class period on the inside of your mask mold. Now with your cardboard, we're just going to eyeball it today. When we're complete with the mask, you're going to trace it out on the cardboard to get the shape of the face, and then get the shape of the hair to cut it out. And we'll attach these together after the mask is complete. Okay, first we're going to cut plaster. We have a bin of plaster strips. We have scissors. These are used for plaster only. And we're going to cut them about 2 finger widths wide and about 5 inches long. You're going to cut as many strips as possible straight into the bucket. Avoid spreading any plaster dust. You don't want to breathe this in too much, okay? Once your hands are wet, you cannot cut more without drying your hands. So cut as much as possible. Dust your hands off over the bucket. Now I have my plaster strips, I have my mask mold, and a cup of warm water. If you have some small, wide disposable containers, you can use that for your warm water. There's 2 sides, a smooth side and a rough side. It really doesn't matter which one you place face down. But the rough side, after you dip it in your warm water, is the side that you're going to gently pull and get that plaster strip wet. You want to have nice, smooth plaster. So you can dip it in the water. You can also get your fingers wet and dab on top. Pull and smooth out the plaster to fill all the gaps in the gauze so that it's not lumpy. You want your plaster to be wet but not totally soaking. So I'm getting it wet, I'm pulling that plaster. It needs a little more water. Smooth it out. Now overlap your plaster strips. Getting plaster too wet could result in lumpy plaster, longer dry time, and a wet table. Do not let the plaster get on the table. Make sure that you protect your work area. It will not come off unless scraped with a metal scraper after it's dry. So the eyes and the nose are usually the first place that you want to start. So I'm going to make sure that I'm overlapping my plaster strips for strength. And you're just pressing very gently into the eye socket. And I'm also being very careful that my plaster strips don't go over the edge of the mask mold. I'm just going down the side of the face. Plaster is the material used for casts. So here you get to see about 40 minutes of laying down plaster strips in just a few minutes. So notice my cup of water is out of the way so I can avoid any spills, and I keep my plaster strips away from my cup of water because if they happen to get wet, I need to use them immediately or they'll be ruined. Plaster cannot be repurposed after it's dry. So I have lots of overlapping layers of gauze, and now I'm going to get the side of the face. Check your edges, make sure that you don't have any holes, that you're smoothing out your plaster strips and applying it as close to that edge as possible, keeping it even. So I have holes here, I'm going to get those covered up. Now this is my first layer. You want to apply all of your layers while the plaster is still wet. Once it hardens, you will have a crisp edge, and you want to get a full layer at a time before it dries. To have a very sturdy mask, you will need a minimum of 3 layers of plaster. So here we are for now. Time to get started applying 2 more layers. Make sure that you work the same way you did the first time so that you can be consistent and not get lost.